Before we get into the story, I just want to acknowledge a couple things. Number one, I want to say for the record that I do not blame my parents whatsoever for sending me to this program. They 100% made the right decision because I was completely out of control and I really gave them no choice. It wasn't just substances and partying that I was getting in trouble with. I was doing other reckless stuff that was a lot more dangerous, and they 100% made the right decision. Number two, I acknowledge that I was very privileged to even be sent to a program like this. Despite it being no picnic, my consequences could have been a lot worse, and I was very lucky that it didn't turn out that way. So with that being said, let's get into it. What's up, you guys? Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. So in my last video, I talked about what it was like growing up and how I started to go down the wrong path. In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the first imminent consequences I had from going down that path. And it occurred when I was 17 years old during my junior year of high school. I had been getting in a lot of fights with my parents, acting out, getting in trouble, smoking weed, drinking, amongst other things. My parents would ground me, I would get more rebellious, and it was a vicious cycle. Well, one day I was grounded and I just about had enough of it. So I called my friends up to come pick me up, and I got up to go out anyway. And as I was walking out the door, my dad turned to me and he said, "Chet, if you walk out that door, your entire life is going to change." And I said, "Yeah, all right, whatever." And I left. Well, he wasn't lying, because a few days later, on May 30th, 2008, I'll never forget the date. It was during the final week of my junior year of high school. I was halfway through my final exams. I'm sleeping in my bed. The lights turn on. I turn to my clock. It's 4 a.m. I look down at the foot of my bed and I see two large men, yoked up, bald heads, standing at the foot of my bed, just staring at me. I go, "What the fuck?" They say, "Your parents are worried about you. We're here to take you to get some help. We could do this the easy way or the hard way." And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Because I think I'm going to rehab. I'm like, my parents are sending me to rehab? Okay, cool. I don't have to go to school. I don't have to take my final exams. I'm gonna be chilling in some fancy rehab in Malibu with Lindsay Lohan. This is lit. I get up, I'm like, cool, man, sure. I start putting on my flyest gear, Chrome Hearts t-shirt. Yeah, I was rocking Chrome Hearts back then. Baggy ass Evisus, pair of white Air Force Ones, and a fitted. I start spraying cologne on me. Then I open up the drawer, there's some condoms in there. I go, "Am I gonna need these?" They go, "No, you're not gonna need those." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." I start packing a bag. They're like, "You're not gonna need that." I'm like, "What you mean?" They're like, "They're gonna provide you with everything you need." I'm like, that's weird. So I go out the house, all confident, get in the back of a car. Child locks on the doors, so you can't get out. I'm like, that's weird. So they start driving. As we get to the street where Malibu is a left, they make a right. And I go, hold up, guys, Malibu's that way. They go, "What makes you think you're going to Malibu?" I'm like, "Well, all the rehabs are in Malibu, right?" They're like, "You're not going to rehab." I'm like, "Well, where am I going?" They're like, "You're going to a wilderness program." "What's a wilderness program? Like camping and shit?" They're like, "Yeah, you could say that." Well, fuck, I hate the outdoors. Like, how long am I gonna be there? They're like, probably be there about 2 weeks. I go, 2 weeks? Fuck, I hate the outdoors, Well, it turns out I was gonna be there a lot longer than 2 weeks. And I remember as we get on the freeway, watching my city go by, I just remember having this feeling that it was gonna be a long time before I was home again, and I was right. So we get on the freeway, and after a few minutes, one of the guys picks up a phone and he goes, "Yeah, we got the client. We'll hit you when we cross the state line into Utah." I go, "Utah? We're going to Utah?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, are you taking me to the airport, or we're driving?" They're like, "We're driving." And I'm like, "Oh, hell no. How long is this gonna be?" Well, the drive was 9 hours long, sitting in the back of that car. 9 hours, chain smoking cigarettes. The dudes actually let me smoke. That was cool. I appreciated that. They were actually kind of cool dudes. They were playing like the Black Album the whole time. But I'm starting to panic because I don't know what I'm getting myself into. 9 hours go by. We drive by Vegas. I see Vegas out the window. I'm like, fuck, man. We drive about 2 hours north past Vegas, and eventually we get to this little town called St. George, Utah. Eventually we get to this little house on a residential street in this quiet town, and they're like, "We're here. This is it. It's just this little house." They walk me out, and we start walking up to the door. As we get to the door, these two Staff come out, hippie looking motherfuckers. One of the guys was an older white guy. He had gray dreadlocks. His name was Clay. Clay was actually a good guy. Shout out Clay. And this younger chick, I think her name was Becca, in her like 20s. So I take one look at these ones and I'm like, oh, okay, like I wasn't gonna be able to run from these fools, but I could definitely run from these motherfuckers. So the dudes leave. The big guys, they leave because they were just transporters. They didn't actually work for the facility. These guys were just paid to transport kids. That was an entire another industry. This industry I was in, this wilderness program industry, how it works was your parents sign over legal guardianship to these places. So they become your legal guardians for the time that you are there. If you try to escape, they have to find you and they can keep you there as long as they want, which I did not know at the time, but I was soon to find out. So they bring me in to the intake. I'm looking around, I'm like, where are all the bunk beds? Where are all the other kids? They're like, the clients don't stay here. The clients stay out in the field. I'm like, out in the field, like what? Like out in the desert? They're like, yes, that's correct. I'm like, okay, so like what? Like we stay in like a cabin or something, and then we like hike around. They're like, no, you're out in the field the whole time. I'm like, so we're outdoors the whole time? They're like, yes, that's correct. So they sit me down and they're trying to make small talk with me. I'm not having it. I'm panicking and I'm angry. They kind of give up trying to talk to me and they start talking amongst themselves. But I go, oh, hold up, I got a question. So I'm gonna be here 2 weeks, right? And they go, 2 weeks? So what makes you think you're gonna be here 2 weeks? And I'm like, well, that's what those guys said. And they're like, well, that's not accurate. So I asked them, well, how long am I gonna be here? And they said, well, that's really up to you. And it was at that moment that I knew I was fucked. And I also knew that I had to make a run for it. So I'm already plotting my escape. I'm wearing baggy pants, so I tighten up my belt. My shoelaces are loose, so I start tightening them up as they're talking amongst themselves. So now I'm all ready to go. I just need to wait for the right moment. So they're talking, and eventually one of them tells a joke to the other one, and they both go like this. They toss their heads back and they close their eyes. That was my moment. Boom, I bolt. I bolt out the door. They're right on me. I sprint down this hallway, knock someone out of the way, bust out these doors like a linebacker, and boom, I'm sprinting down the street and they are right on my tail. And now I'm sprinting down the street, sprinting for my life. I had in my mind that I would, run, hide behind a bush, wait for them to go by, dip out, go to a gas station, call up someone, tell them to come pick me up. Well, that's not how it went because as I'm running, I realized there's nowhere to run. It's just one long street, one long stretch of street. There's no intersections. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. So I'm just running down the street. And I probably sprinted full on for about a mile. Well, as I come to the end of the street at the very first intersection, guess what's on the corner of the intersection? The local police station. And as I'm running by, a squad car pulls up, an SUV, woo woo! Pulls up right in front of me, cop gets out, whoa, 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 gets in front of me, blocks me off, and I just collapse on the ground. Collapse on the ground because I can't even breathe. I'm so exhausted. I'm going, I thought I was gonna suffocate. I thought I was gonna suffocate from lack of air. That's how exhausted I was, just absolutely physically spent. I didn't even know I was capable of feeling that exhausted. A couple minutes later, Clay and Becca catch up to me. They're gassed, they're catching their breath, they're huffing, and they're like, oh, you're pretty fast. They get me up, they restrain me, put my wrists in a zip tie, and they start walking me back to the intake center. So we get back to the intake center, they sit me down, we all catch our breath for a few minutes, and then they start telling me that it's time to get processed, get me my gear, and get me out in the field. And I'm like, I'm not going. I want a phone call. I'm not doing this. I'm not playing ball. I'm not moving. Tough shit. So they go back and forth with me for like an hour trying to convince me to get processed, and I'm just refusing. Well, eventually they go, okay, and they leave the room. A few minutes later, another dude walks in, a guy I haven't seen before. Big dude, yoked up. He sits across from me and he says, check this out. If you think that we don't have methods of dealing with kids who refuse to get processed, you're wrong. We do have ways we go about this. It's not pleasant. I suggest you just comply. And I'm just like, fuck. So I waved the white flag. I gave up and I said, okay, fine, you got me. I get processed. Full body search, stripped down naked, squat and cough, little picture like a mugshot, get me my gear issued, put all my personal belongings in a box. I just remember taking off my clothes and putting on these new ones and just feeling like, I didn't even know who I was anymore because so much of my identity at that point was wrapped up in this persona and this image of who I was trying to be. So they issued me my new gear. Orange t-shirt, khaki cargo pants that could turn into shorts with the zippers at the knee, a pair of boots, a pair of Chucks, 2 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of socks, a big ass backpack, a sleeping bag, a sleeping mat, thin, about 1 centimeter thick, piece of foam, and a tarp. They put me in the back of a truck, in the cab of a truck, both staff on each side of me. They tell me to take my bandana out and blindfold myself. I blindfold myself and they proceed to drive me in the back of this truck for about 2.5 hours on a bumpy dirt road into the middle of nowhere, into the wilderness, the high desert of southern Utah, one of the most remote and inhospitable places in the United States. This is the place where they conducted nuclear bomb tests during the 1940s. That's how remote it is. Finally, the truck comes to a stop. They say, we're here. They tell me to get out. I get out, I take off my blindfold. They're like, you are now about to join the group. Follow our instructions and do as we say. I'm like, okay. So they walk me off the dirt road into thick brush. It's the desert, so it's nothing but juniper trees, sagebrush, dirt, and rocks. That's it. It wasn't picturesque. They walk me through the brush into a little clearing and it opens up and I see the group. About 10 to 12 other kids, also all in orange, and 4 staff in their, late 20s, early 30s. The kids are doing what I was later to find out is busting fires using the system of the Indian bow drill, making fires from rubbing sticks together, not with your hands. That's a hand drill. They're using an Indian bow drill, which is the technique the Native Americans used. It's a branch from a tree in the shape of a bow with a piece of cord in it, a spindle intertwined in it, a top rock up top, motioning the spindle like this with the bow on a plank. That's how they make fire. That's what we have to do every day if we want to earn the privilege of eating hot food. The first thing I notice about these kids is that they're all absolutely filthy, covered in dirt and grime. Filthy. They looked homeless. They're all busting their bow drills, making fires. And as I get there, they look at me and they go, oh, we got a new one, guys. We got an EPer, got a new EP. And I'm looking at them and they're just looking at me, but they're just like ignoring me, like not even talking to me. So the staff leads me to this tree off to the side and they say, sit here by this tree and don't talk to anybody. I go, why are they calling me an EPer? What's an EPer and EP? They go, you're on Earth phase. While you're on Earth phase, you are not a member of the group yet. You have to earn your right to join the group once you make fire phase. While you're on Earth phase, you are not allowed to speak to anybody and nobody is allowed to speak to you. Don't try speaking to anybody because they won't respond anyway and we will take note that you're not complying. All you have to do right now is sit here and do absolutely nothing. A couple minutes later, the staff gets up and they go to the group, good news, guys. Busting time is over. Put away your busting kits because next we are gonna play pelt. And they pull out this hacky sack and all these kids, as soon as they pull out the hacky sack, they're overjoyed. Yeah, pelt, woohoo, yeah. Like overjoyed, like happy as fuck to be playing pelt, whatever the fuck that is. Like they're not even stuck in this fucking wilderness program. And that really disturbed me. I was like, these kids are fucking brainwashed. And then it really disturbed me because I realized that I was about to be one of them. The rest of the day goes by and I'm just sitting there thinking about what I had done to get here and really regretting my actions. And I proceeded to sit there by that tree for 5 days straight without speaking to anybody, without doing anything. When it was dinner time, a staff came over and gave me my dinner, which was beans and rice in a cup, and he gave me a plastic spoon. He said, don't break this plastic spoon or throw it away. We're giving you this spoon as a privilege since you don't know how to craft your own utensils yet. But as soon as you are no longer on Earth phase, you will not be able to use this spoon and we will break it because you will have to craft your own utensils out of wood. So I eat my beans and rice and I go to sleep that night. My first night, I had to sleep on a tarp with me on top of the tarp, another tarp put on top of me, and 2 staff on each side of me. So I'm like sandwiched in there so I can't get up and run. They take our boots and our shoes before we go to sleep that night for further security that we're not gonna try to make an escape. So that's how I spent my first night, with 2 grown men sleeping on each side of me in the middle, sandwiched like in a straitjacket in between 2 tarps. Eventually, I was given an assignment. I had to write down my entire life story on a piece of paper. And I was told that once I read that life story to the group, I will be eligible to join fire phase. They also had a bunch of assignments, writing assignments I had to do in this pamphlet in order to check off, in order to join fire phase. Well, after a few days, when I had earned my right to join fire phase, we circled up and I read my life story to all these kids I had never met before. I shared, the truth about my story of who I am, who my dad is, and needless to say, they were all very surprised. Eventually, one of the kids, his name was Jeremy, who was my mentor, was the one to initiate me into fire phase. So they do this ceremony where they explain to you the rules of fire phase, how now you have to do chores and whatnot. You have to earn your privileges every day to eat hot food by busting fires, and each member of the group gives you a piece of the fire kit, everything you need, all the materials to start busting fires. Well, what they didn't tell you is that since every single kid has to harvest their own pieces of the fire kit, and they're stressed out because they want to eat hot food, they all give you the shittiest piece of equipment they have, little spindles that are worn down to a nub, all the shittiest ones they have. So you got all this shitty equipment that you have to start busting fires every day immediately if you want to eat hot food. Needless to say, no one does. It usually takes about 2 weeks to get it down. It's extremely difficult to actually master it and start busting fires. And especially when you're using shitty equipment, you have to harvest your own materials if you really want to do it right. But they don't care about this. The rules apply to you immediately. It's not designed to be comfortable. It's designed to be punitive. So needless to say, you're not eating hot food when you first get there. When the time comes to eat and everybody who's already busted a fire starts to eat, you have to sit there and watch your food get ice cold until you can eat your cold beans and rice. My first day on fire phase, I can finally start speaking to other people, and I was happy about that. But you're not allowed to speak to anybody unless a staff can hear you. It's called talking out of earshot. If you turn to somebody and go, man, this is such bullshit, and you're whispering to each other, that's a punishment. That's not complying. If a staff catches you doing that, then you get put on separates, which is like being back on earth phase. So anytime the staff have to circle up and talk amongst themselves, everybody else has to sit there in silence. If you get caught whispering to each other, then you're in trouble. So first day of fire phase, you have to do chores. You need to carry the equipment when you go on hikes. You need to clean up everything, pack up everything, clean the dishes. You cook for yourself. The group cooks for themselves. Beans and rice every night for dinner. Granola and oats with some water and powdered milk for breakfast. Brown sugar to add to the milk was a privilege that had to be earned. Hot sauce, sriracha or tapatio for your beans and rice. That had to be earned. If you weren't keeping up with your chores, you didn't get these condiments like sugar and hot sauce, and you just had to eat plain. So everything was based upon earning absolutely everything that you had. Now, I noticed that some kids were walking around and they had flashlights, headlamps tied to their heads. I didn't get one of these. So I'm like, go to the staff, I'm like, hey, I don't have a headlamp. You guys must have messed up. They're like, no, those are earned. You have to earn that. And I'm like, well, how do I earn that? They're like, you have to bust 15 fires and get them checked off. So before you earn your headlamp, every night when it gets pitch black, you're stumbling around in absolute darkness. So at night, when you have to set up your tarp, we don't get tents. We just sleep in a tarp, under a tarp that we fashion in a roof. It's called an A-frame. You take 4 different pieces of cord, tie them to the corners in the middle of the tarp, have to tie them to trees and sticks and rocks or whatever else you can find to form the frame of a roof. You sleep on just your thin sleeping pad, piece of foam, right there under it in the dirt, no pillow, just with your sleeping bag. That's your shelter. You have to make your shelter every night in the pitch black before you earn your headlamp. They don't give a shit if you can't see anything. You just have to feel around and figure it out and go by the moonlight. But some nights when it wasn't a full moon, there'd be no moon, it'd be pitch black. It was very difficult trying to fashion your shelter in the middle of the night. But they didn't give a shit about that. Like I said, it's not designed to be therapeutic, it's designed to be punitive. My first week, we had to spend hours and hours taking down miles of barbed wire fence from some rancher who owned land out there that he had paid the facility to have these kids do. So we're basically doing manual labor for free. After a few days of being there, I got to meet my therapist for the first time. The dude who was gonna be in charge of when I get to leave. His name was Justin. So Justin comes out and he's the therapist for all of us. He comes out for 2 days at a time, spends an hour talking with each kid, and then does an assessment to the rest of the staff and leaves once a week. So on my first session with Justin, I instantly realized that I'm in way over my head with this dude. I tried talking to him about how I've learned my lesson and how I'm good to go home, and he laughs at me and says, every single kid says that. You're not going anywhere. And he would also play mind games with us. He would say stuff like, I bet you really wish you could be smoking a blunt right now with your homies. If you say, no, I'm not, I don't want to do that anymore, he calls you out for not being honest and for lying. If you say, yeah, I wish I was smoking a blunt with my homies, then he calls you out for not being compliant and not being ready to change. So whatever you do, you're fucked. This is the game. They keep these kids here as long as possible. Meanwhile, they're manipulating the parents, telling them arbitrary shit that's just gonna result in you needing to be there longer because they get paid by the day. So they come up with any reason they can to keep you there so they can milk your parents for your money. And they clearly knew that my parents were whales and they were gonna milk them however way they could. So I was damned if I did and damned if I don't. Pretty much any answer I could give was gonna be the wrong answer, and they're just manipulating your parents the whole time to get you to stay as long as possible. So after about a week there, something weird happened. We woke up and it wasn't the same routine. Instead, this day, instead of telling us to do the normal shit, they told us to grab our packs, put them all in a line, just take our food, our shelter, and our sleeping bag, and sit down and put your blindfolds on. We didn't know what the fuck was going on. But I heard one kid go, his name was Rick Hopkins from the Bay, from San Jose. What's good, bro? He goes, these are gonna be the solos, dude. I heard about these. And I'm like, what the fuck is a solo? They line us up, they group up, they're all whispering to each other, the staff. Eventually they tell us to get up, we're blindfolded, to get in a single file line, to put your arm on the person in front of you, and they start leading us out into the desert in circles. We're walking around with our pack, with our sleeping materials and our food over our shoulder. Person in front of us blindfolded. We're just walking around in circles. They're walking us around for like an hour in circles, so we're completely disoriented. We have no idea where we are. All of a sudden, they start to take people one by one off of the line. So eventually they take the person before you and your arm drops and you're the next one up. One by one, the line starts dropping off until the staff grab you, you're blindfolded, you lead them also down a path in circles. You stop, they tell you to take your blindfold off, and you are completely by yourself in the middle of nowhere with the staff in front of you, and they say, you're on your solo. You see that tree to that bush over there? This is your area. Do not leave your area. If you leave your area, there will be consequences. When you need water, put your cup by that rock. When you need food, put your cup by that rock. We will come around to fill it up. When we come around, do not try speaking to us. If you do, we will not respond anyway, and there will be consequences for not complying. You don't have to do anything but sit here and stay here. And they leave you there for about 5-6 days. From dawn until dusk, you're just sitting in the middle of nowhere, completely by yourself, doing absolutely nothing. And this to me was the hardest part of the whole experience, because you really have no idea how deafening silence can be. You have nothing but your own thoughts, thinking of everything you've done to get to this position, regretting it, regretting the pain that you've caused your family. The boredom is also absolutely crippling. You start doing weird things just to pass the time. I just started walking around naked. I played baseball with a stick and rocks. I would just toss a rock up, hit it, and see how far I could get it. You keep on trying to come up with things to do. We didn't have a notebook. We didn't have a book. They did that on purpose, so there's nothing to do. So there's nothing that you can distract yourself with. And eventually I just gave up trying to think of things to do, and I would pretty much just lay there and sit there and wait for the time to pass and wonder how much longer I was gonna be doing this. So after 5-6 days, the staff comes around and they said the solo is over and the group's coming back together. By the time that was over and I rejoined the group, I was just happy to be able to speak to another human being again. I didn't even care that I was stuck in this wilderness program anymore. I was just happy to be able to have human interaction. That's the crazy part about these programs, because the brainwashing is real. I was in this wilderness program for 15 weeks. I was there longer than anybody else I had seen come and go. Pretty much all we did was hike every single day, 80-pound packs on us for miles. I was there during the summer. It was 120 degrees during the day. You're shitting in a hole that everybody has to shit in. You have to dig the hole yourself. It's covered in flies. It sounds like a helicopter. There's so many flies. You have to ask permission to go take a shit. You have to ask permission to go take a piss. As you separate yourself from the group and have to wander off to do so, you have to repeatedly call your name over and over again so they know where you are. Chet, 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 squatting over a hole taking a shit. If you stop calling, they go, I can't hear you, Chet! Just absolute desperation. Another one of my first nights, it was so dry out there. I've gotten nosebleeds since I was a kid. My nose started gushing blood in the middle of the night. It was pitch black. I didn't have a headlight. There was nothing to clog my nose with, and I just had to bleed all over myself until I fell asleep. When I woke up, I had blood all over me. Everybody was freaked out. I was like, no, it's chill. I just had a nosebleed. The kids there were some other cool kids there. Most of the kids were like me. They were just kids that got in trouble. Shout out my boy, Eric Reinhart, Diego Navarro, rest in peace. Rick Hopkins from San Jose, Asher Gaylord from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, Ryan DiCamillo from the Bay. These were good dudes, and I haven't even spoke to them in a long time, but I'll never forget you guys. And there were some other kids there that were just complete fucking weirdos that you just wanted nothing to do with. Another privilege you had to earn was this thing called a Crazy Creek chair that you only earned when you got to water phase. Now, the Crazy Creek chair is like this little fold-out chair that you could lay back in and rock back and forth. This was like a status symbol. It made life a lot easier because if you didn't have that chair, you just had to sit on your ass in the dirt. Your back would be killing you after weeks of this. Everybody wanted that chair, but in order to earn that chair and be a water phaser, what you basically had to do was be like a snitch, like a fake leader, like everyone try to encourage people to do their chores better. But you didn't have to get on water phase in order to leave. They told me on the first day I got there that most of the people don't even make it to water phase. Most of the people just stay on fire phase. So I decided early on, I said, okay, fuck water phase. I'm not even gonna do it then. Well, little did I know, they were keeping me there until I showed the initiative to make a water phase. I ended up having to, bullshit my way through half-assing it until, I was there for so long. They just had to, kind of give it to me, but I never did any of that bullshit where you'd have to be like a snitch and just be a fake ass leader. I just did the bare minimum until they couldn't refuse to put me on water phase anymore. There were lightning storms all the time. This is during monsoon season. So I had never to this day have ever been in lightning storms this intense. When lightning storms would break out, everyone had to drop what they were doing, spread out to their shelters, and sit on the ground with this little surface area on the ground as possible in case lightning struck nearby you and you could get electrocuted. During these storms, the flaps on your tarp would be like just flapping because the wind would be so intense, it'd be so loud, and y'all had to sound off and scream your number one being the person who's there for the longest, and it's constantly rotating as people leave. So you'd be 1, 2, 3, 4! And if you didn't scream it loud enough, then they'd make you scream it louder because they needed to always hear that you were alive. So you'd just be doing this for like hours whenever lightning storms broke out, just sitting there screaming at the top of your lungs your number over and over and over again for hours until the storm cleared up. When I got there, I was 17, so I was in the juveniles program, but I actually had my 18th birthday while I was there. And when you turn 18, you have the option to leave, even though this option is irrelevant because it's a 2.5-week hike to the nearest town. And I had already been there for like 12 weeks when I turned 18, so I figured my time must be coming up soon. I might as well just stay until, I can get driven out, because they also instruct your parents to have no contact with you if you do choose to leave. So I turned 18 there, and I had to leave the juveniles group, all my homies, to go to the adults group. The adults, not like real adults, it was more just like, 19, 20 years old, and I had to transfer to a different therapist. Now, this next therapist I had, his name was Charlie. I don't remember his last name, but I wish I did. And this dude was a piece of shit. He was a cruel, manipulative bastard who did everything he could to break me down psychologically and just get inside my head and start twisting things. I didn't feel comfortable, obviously, opening up to any of these people because it wasn't designed to be that way. I really didn't open up at all. Who would? He had just been allowing me to make small talk and not really open up or anything this whole time. Then at week 12, he goes, when the fuck are you gonna get honest and tell me how you really fucking feel? Like that. And I said, you wanna know how I really feel? He goes, yeah, I wanna know what's on your mind. And I go, oh, you wanna know what's on my mind? You wanna know what's on my mind? The only thing that's always on my mind, every second of every fucking day, when the fuck am I gonna get out of here? I've already been here longer than everyone else. And he said, he had this, I'll never forget his face. He had this shit-eating grin on his face, and he looked at me and he said, you're not getting out of here anytime soon. Yeah, that was tough. Well, after 15 weeks, I started feeling like I was never gonna get out. I honestly started thinking that they were going to keep me here for years. That was the worst part about all of this, is not knowing when you're leaving. It was like psychological torture. That panic that I felt my very first day, it just continued throughout this entire experience for months. The panic never subsided. The only thing I thought about every second of every day was, when am I getting out of here? Wondering what I need to do to be compliant to get out of here, not knowing that even if you're being compliant, they're just telling your parents that you're playing a game and not getting real, so it's keeping you there longer. There's nothing you can do that is actually going to expedite your exit, because they wouldn't tell you when you're leaving until the moment before. You're out there for months, they would come up to you and say, okay, guess what? You're leaving in an hour. So you're constantly waiting for that moment. Well, after 15 weeks, I finally feel like that moment's gonna happen for me. They approach me and they say, hey, we got good news, Chet. I'm like, holy shit, this is it. And they go, you earned a phone call with your parents. I'm expecting to leave, and they just telling me I got a phone call. And I just completely pretty much disintegrated. I had like a mental break. I had become broken. It was the lowest moment of my life. I just completely lost it, to the point of hysteria beyond, what I even knew I was capable of. I believe it was at this moment that they realized I was a potential liability and I was having a full-on mental break. And I did, they broke me psychologically, broke me down until I was absolutely nothing. And it was a few days later that I was told I was leaving. But I didn't go home. I went to another facility in Utah, a boarding school, also extremely restrictive. This is where I finished my high school credits, and I was there for a year and some change, where I finished my high school credits and applied to colleges. These wilderness programs, the one I went to was called Second Nature Entrada. 2008, 2010, this was the height of the business. These places are now shut down because of lawsuits, gross negligence, death, abuse that have happened at these places. Most of them are being shut down now. People are exposing them. Paris Hilton, Bad Baby, and I guess now you can add me to the list. But all in all, I will say this. I'm not resentful at all at my parents for sending me, because they didn't even know what these places were really like. These places all marketed themselves and packaged themselves like they were these fun experiences.
The parents did not know the reality of what was going on. But I also appreciated it because I had fucked up enough where they didn't know what else to do with me, and they made the right decision by sending me to do this. I don't regret the experience at all because I found God out there, and it did change me. Not in the way that these programs are supposed to change these kids, but in a way that was completely my own. But that dude Charlie, he's a piece of shit, and people like that should be held accountable. Thanks for watching this, you guys.